There is a bridge that has stood between Windsor, Ontario and Detroit, Michigan for 97 years. The Ambassador Bridge, built 1929, the single busiest international land border crossing on the planet. Through the Great Depression, through World War II, through the Cold War, through 9/11, when Canada opened its airports and its homes to stranded Americans within hours. That relationship, the closest alliance in modern history, started dying on January 21st, 2026, at Davos, Switzerland. Before the markets opened, before Ottawa finished its morning coffee, before the diplomatic cables even cleared the wire, Donald Trump looked into a camera and said on record to the world, "Canada lives because of the United States. Remember that, Mark." It's called the Canada-India Comprehensive Economic Partnership, and the bilateral partnership signed this week is worth $5.5 billion, a $2.6 billion uranium supply deal running from 2027 to 2035, a CEPA trade framework targeting $70 billion in annual trade by 2030, 1.4 billion people, the world's fourth largest economy, 9 agreements signed across energy, AI, critical minerals, and defense. And America is not on that list. This isn't trade policy. This is tectonic. The alliance that won the Cold War. The relationship that built the modern world economy. Over. Not by China, not by Russia, by the man who called the Prime Minister of Canada, governor. In 12 minutes, I'll show you the exact words Trump spoke that detonated 80 years of trust. The receipts. 3 data sets that prove Canada is walking permanently. How Carney built a $5.5 billion alternative in 40 days flat. And why your energy bill, your 401k, and your national security are all on the line. You are watching a reorientation of the Western world, not by an adversary, by the closest friend America ever had. Don't look away. 6 weeks ago, Donald Trump addressed the World Economic Forum at Davos. It was supposed to be a speech about American prosperity. It became something else entirely. According to full transcripts confirmed by the BBC, the AP, and the CBC, he said, live on global television, "Canada lives because of the United States. Remember that, Mark." Let's unpack what just happened. He addressed the Prime Minister of 38 million people, a G7 economy, a NATO founding member, a nuclear-capable ally, by first name. Not Prime Minister Carney, Mark, like a subordinate, like a governor, because that's what he'd been calling him for weeks. Not Prime Minister, Governor Mark Carney, an insult that says, your country is a province, your office is ceremonial, you answer to me. Canada lives because of the United States, not trades with, not prospers alongside, lives, as in, your existence is contingent on our generosity. Withdraw the generosity, and you cease to exist. He was telling the leader of the world's 9th largest economy, a country that supplies 60% of American crude oil imports, that it exists at America's pleasure. 3 days later, January 24th, Trump threatened 100% tariffs on all Canadian goods if Canada finalized its trade agreement with China. Canada signed the deal anyway. The response from Ottawa was not panic. It was not pleading. It was one line, delivered in Quebec City, nationally televised. Canada doesn't live because of the United States. Canada thrives because we are Canadian. Then Carney boarded a plane to New Delhi. Within 5 days, negotiating teams were deployed to India. Within 14 days, terms of reference for a full CEPA were finalized. Within 40 days, Carney stood next to Prime Minister Modi and signed 9 agreements worth $5.5 billion. Trump called Canada a dependent colony. Carney flew east and built an empire. That's what happens when you confuse patience for weakness. We do evidence here, not opinion, evidence, documents, data. India-Canada Joint Leaders Statement, March 2nd, 2026. A formal government-to-government document published simultaneously by the Prime Minister's office in Ottawa and India's Ministry of External Affairs in New Delhi. Confirmed by Reuters, the BBC, and Bloomberg within hours. The document details a comprehensive economic partnership agreement, CEPA, with formal terms of reference agreed upon, and negotiations targeting completion by end of 2026. Here is the specific language from the Department of Atomic Energy Agreement, executed by Cameco Corporation. Nearly 22 million pounds of uranium ore concentrate, U3O8, delivered to India between 2027 and 2035, valued at approximately 2.6 billion Canadian dollars at current uranium prices. Let that number sit there for a moment. Canada just locked in nearly a decade of uranium revenue, with the world's most populous nation, for reactors that will power a grid of 1.4 billion people. That's not a trade deal, that's an energy lifeline. And the US is not the provider. Money doesn't lie. Let's listen. US-Canada trade fell for the third consecutive year in 2025, the first time that has ever happened. Canadian goods exports to the US dropped 21.4% in Q2 2025 alone, levels not seen since 2021. US spirits exports to Canada plummeted 85% in Q2 2025. US wine to Canada fell 76% for the full year, a $428 million loss for American producers. Meanwhile, what Canada's pivot is doing. In the first 10 months of 2025, Canada's trade with US markets was down approximately 4%. Canada's trade with non-US markets was up 13%. The market is voting. It's voting with contracts, with capital allocation, with 22 million pounds of uranium. It's voting for Delhi over Detroit. Let that sink in. Within 72 hours of Canada signing its China trade deal, Trump posted on Truth Social, threatening 100% tariffs. Not 25, not 35, 100. Post 1. Canada lives because of the United States. Remember that, Mark. Historical grievance dressed as fact. Post 2. Called Carney governor, a personal diminishment of a democratically elected head of government. Post 3. Threatened to rupture the trade relationship with a founding NATO ally over a sovereign trade decision. That's the critical one. Post 4. We don't need Canada. His words, his record, the country that supplies 60% of American crude imports. The country whose intelligence partnership is the backbone of Five Eyes. We don't need them. Every allied capital is now asking the same question. If this is the price of American friendship, what exactly is American friendship worth? Here is why Trump cannot stop this. His model is dominance hierarchy. He is the alpha. Allies submit. If they don't, they are punished. Punished harder, until they submit. This model works in boardrooms, reality television. It does not work in global capital allocation. Capital is not a person. You cannot bully it. You cannot tweet at it. You cannot call it governor. Capital is water. It flows toward stability, toward predictability, away from heat, chaos, and 3 a.m. ultimatums. The doom loop. Trump claims, you need us. Carney proves Canada doesn't. Each refutation makes the claim look weaker. Trump escalates the claim louder. The loop tightens. America stands alone, shouting at history. Where Trump is loud, Carney is quiet. Where Trump threatens, Carney calculates. Where Trump demands loyalty, Carney offers contracts. This is the core asymmetry. Power doesn't come from being feared. It comes from being trusted. In a world on fire, boring is worth billions. Carney was a central banker. He managed the Bank of Canada through the 2008 financial crisis, the Bank of England through Brexit. He knows one thing with absolute certainty. Reliability is the most expensive asset in the world. And Trump just liquidated America's entire position. Trump demands loyalty. Carney earns trust. Trump treats allies as tenants. Carney treats allies as investors. One of those strategies builds $70 billion trade corridors by 2030. Your energy bill. Canada is the single largest source of American crude oil. 60% of U.S. crude imports flow south across that border. Canada is now negotiating to redirect LNG and heavy oil east to India. Less supply flowing south means U.S. energy prices rise. Not metaphorically, at the pump, this winter. Your 401k. The S&P has absorbed the tariff shock. Your retirement account has not recovered the gains lost in Q1 and Q2 2025 when tariff announcements hit markets. Meanwhile, Canada's trade with non-US markets grew 13% last year. The diversification premium is going to allied economies, not yours. Your national security. Five Eyes is the most sacred intelligence architecture in Western civilization. The US, Canada, UK, Australia, New Zealand. It survived the Cold War. It survived 9/11. Trump's repeated rhetoric about Canada as a 51st state and threats to rupture the economic relationship are fracturing the trust infrastructure that Five Eyes runs on. If Five Eyes fractures, Americans die. Not metaphorically, literally. Your reputation. For 80 years, American leadership meant stability. It meant the rules-based order. It meant you could build a factory near the border, hire workers, make things, and the relationship would hold. Canada just signed a uranium deal with India for 9 years. 9 years. That's how long the confidence horizon has shifted. Away from America. Takes decades to build. One Davos speech to destroy. Right now, in New Delhi, Prime Minister Modi is standing at a podium where Canadian and Indian flags hang side by side. The uranium contracts are signed. The CEPA framework is live. The target, $70 billion in annual trade by 2030 between Canada and India, up from roughly $35 billion today. 250 miles east of the Ambassador Bridge, in Windsor, Ontario, excavators are moving on energy infrastructure. LNG terminals in the planning phase, critical mineral corridors opening east, not south. Because one man decided insults were more important than integration. Modi described this week's agreements as, and I want you to hear these exact words, a light-year leap. Not an incremental improvement, not a diplomatic courtesy call, a light-year leap. And America is not in the equation. Trump started the fire, and every tariff, every governor, every Truth Social post he throws at it turns out to be gasoline. How many allies have to pivot east before this stops being a trade war and starts being a civilizational realignment? If you are in a state that depends on Canadian energy, Canadian auto parts, or Canadian raw materials, how does this feel? Is this what you voted for? Drop it in the comments. I read every single one.